From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
With a double-digit lead in the poll, some say David Cicilline's U.S. House seat is now Brendan Doherty's to lose. But the Republican challenger to the Democratic incumbent is now going to face more questions about where he stands on the issues. Cicilline himself may have a primary opponent to face before he even gets to challenge Doherty one-on-one. In-depth analysis with our political roundtable on the race for U.S. House District 1 and much more this week on Newsmakers. Good morning. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me this week on the political roundtable to my right, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi and Eyewitness News analyst Arlene Violet, and sitting to my left, columnist for the Providence Journal, Edward Fitzpatrick, and Eyewitness News political analyst and pollster, Joe Fleming. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Let's start the discussion, obviously, on the first congressional race. Last week, sitting right where you're sitting, Joe, Brendan Doherty conducted his first extended television interview, and I want to get everybody's post-mortem on that performance. Ted, you know, David Cicilline, I'm sure, wants to separate himself as much as possible from the headlines in Providence. Should Congressman Cicilline challenge Brendan Doherty to 30 debates between now and November?
Well, you know, I won't go as far as to call it a disaster for Brendan Doherty, but it wasn't too far from that. I mean, listening to him, he didn't seem to know what the Bush tax cuts were and what those involved. I mean, you can easily see, on the one hand, we were talking before the show, it's early, you know, it's not necessarily the voters are paying close attention, but for the Republicans in Washington who are looking up here and they're like, are we going to put money into the Rhode Island 1st Congressional District? He does have that big a lead in the polls. If they flip on the TV and see, geez, this guy's not ready for primetime, that could really hurt him where he's going to need that money.
And the Bush tax cuts was something that's near and dear to the conservatives' heart, and he seemed to not be able to grasp that very well, and he said that we should let them all expire. I think if Speaker Boehner was watching that, there would be sort of a gasp.
But then when you pointed out what they included, he said, well, not those maybe, and we'll take another look. It was, Joe, I think, said last year, he should be spending this first year quietly learning the issues and raising money. He's raised the money,
he has.
But has he done enough homework?
Well, it seems since last May, when he said he was running for this, they really haven't briefed him very well. He also has a tell. He answers every question with his hand on the table, and he'll drop his voice if he's comfortable with the answer. When he's not comfortable, he stops like he's mid-sentence with his voice up, and then dives and takes a drink and puts it down.
How about this for analysis?
I don't understand why the campaign hasn't noticed that that's what he does when he's uncomfortable.
Well, they'll bring people up from Washington, D.C. to train him on that.
The one thing is it's early enough, Arlene. It's only March, and people are not focused on the 1st Congressional District at this point. So they could take that tape from last week, they can analyze it, they could bring us, Tim just said, people in from Washington to work with him now to get him correct and to update him on the issue so he knows exactly what's going on.
And Ed, Cicilline's opponent last year was John Laughlin. Two very different Republicans we're talking about here, huh?
Yeah, when you guys hosted the debate at PPAC, you saw Laughlin really brought the fight to him. You know, Cicilline is an excellent debater. He's a policy wonk. You know, he's really got his mind around the issues. But Laughlin went with him toe-to-toe, and based on last week's performance, it's unclear if Doherty can do that type of thing. You know, he goes into it, I think, with, 15 percentage point advantage in the polls. He's got good money. He's got a vulnerable opponent, but, last week showed that he may not be ready for primetime. And I know what you're saying. It's people aren't tuned in yet, but I did a column back in May and June and was asking him, I wasn't saying, what's the currency fluctuation like in Uzbekistan. I was just asking about Obamacare and some of the big issues of the day, and he was saying, well, we're reviewing that, we'll get back to you. Well, he's had the time to do the homework. Prime time is here.
I want to bring up from our exclusive poll, we did a head-to-head matchup between Brendan Doherty and Congressman Cicilline. We asked if the election were tomorrow. You can see there's a 15-point lead for Brendan Doherty. 16% are unsure. But how did Joe? How did David Cicilline do with Democrats? I mean, this is his base.
Democrats, he got 54% of the Democratic vote. That's not enough to win a re-election in this district. It's a more Democratic district.
He can win them back.
That's the key to this race. I think there's a path for David Cicilline to get back in the race, which is to get the Democratic vote from 54% up to 70 to 75%, the union vote, which is trailing 56% to 27%, get the union members back. And the third group he has to get back is the senior citizens, where he's losing 2-1 also. So these are three groups that in this first congressional district traditionally vote Democrat, and two of them are not voting for him at this time. So there's a chance.
Arlene, strong Republican voice here. You seem to think this is still Congressman Cicilline.
I think it's his to lose, notwithstanding respectfully that particular poll. First of all, it's quasi-gerrymandered, the congressional district, to bring more Democrats in and to throw more Republicans out. 2006, more Democrats came out to vote from the core cities when we had a casino question on. There probably will be if the Narragansett's litigation doesn't work. And that's, I think the X factor is Obama and who the Republican candidate is. The Republicans are alienating women across the board with that contraception issue and all the men up there talking about what women's reproductive rights, Republican men. That's ridiculous. And what, RoboCop Romney or Saint Santorum or President Moonbeam? Are they going to Grinch? President Grinch? Who's going to come out? They're not even attractive candidates. And I think the Republicans are becoming so extreme that even Republican women are worried about them. This Republican woman is worried about them.
You make a good point. Cicilline only trails by 7 points among female voters in the first congressional district. So he has a group he could really make some movement with.
Yeah, but when you said gerrymandering, and you're referring to the redistricting that they did, and that got hot and heavy between our two congressmen. There was some anger there, but it didn't help, according to our poll, David Cicilline in any way.
This poll was done with the new district lines,
right?
So we took that into consideration when we did the survey.
And he did worse.
Yes, he did a little bit worse than he did last time. Last time he was trailing Brendan Doherty by 13% a year ago. So it's basically with a margin of error. But his numbers have not improved with these new district lines.
So let's talk about the problem. Ed, you want to jump in? Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, Congress, anybody in Congress, their numbers are down. But usually hear people say, well, I don't like Congress, but I like my congressman. But it's not true for Cicilline.
They don't like Congress and they don't like their congressman. That's not a great way to go into this election.
No.
And the other problem for Congressman Cicilline here is there really is no end in sight for the fiscal problems in Providence, particularly going into November. And I think that people are seeing East Providence stumble, Woonsocket, Central Falls, the sentiment here might not be that they blame David Cicilline for the problems in Providence, but more that they thought he put lipstick on a pig.
He's painted himself into this extraordinary corner, Tim, at this point. I mean, just the other day we had Fitch slash Providence's bond rating, and I reached out for comment to his office to hear, what the congressman's take is, and he said he basically said it vindicates him. This shows that what Mayor Taveras and I have said all along is accurate about Providence, that it's state aid, it's the recession, and it's unsustainable pension costs. Now, while those are absolutely the core factors driving Providence into trouble, is that what voters felt like they were told by him in 2010, that Providence is in terrible shape because of these three factors? No, they were told it's in excellent financial condition, and he's going to say, well, I meant I've left it in excellent financial condition considering everything else, but that's like, otherwise Mrs. Lincoln, how is the play? The city's bankrupt.
I think it's a credibility issue now.
Yes.
And he's trying to change the topic. He's saying, I'm working hard in Congress, but if you're a freshman
in a
minority party, it's hard to get something done.
Let's talk about Anthony Gemma here, because before David Cicilline even gets to face Brendan Doherty in a debate or anything like that, the big question is he going to run? And I got to tell you, the question is just starting to annoy me at this point because it's been hanging on for so long.
Like the dance of the seven veils.
Right, and remember last time he got into the race at the 11th hour, so you would think that he wouldn't make the same mistake again.
Well, right now he still is. Because if he's going to run, he needs to get in this race right now. I mean, he's showing signs he's going to be in the race. But if you want to run against David Cicilline, he has to be there now because he has a lot of work to do. He has to build an organization, which he doesn't have. The Democratic establishment will be solidly with David Cicilline. He may have a few conservative Democrats supporting him, but most of the Democrats will be with Cicilline. And in the Democratic primary, when that's probably going to be the only state district race, he has to have a way to get the voters out to vote.
Gemma's got to have that organization. You're 100% correct. And he has one message. And the one message is people do not believe David Cicilline. He told the truth. If you want to lose the seat, vote for him. If you want to keep it, you got to vote for me. That's his only message.
I want to play a quick soundbite. Ted and I interviewed Anthony Gemma to get his reaction to the poll results because we threw his name into the poll. And he had something interesting to say about his thoughts on running in the race. Let's take a listen.
David Cicilline was lying through the campaign. He continues to lie now, and I should have actually taken that stance much earlier. I tried to take a softer approach, and that's really not how the political landscape works. So you see me come out very aggressive now. I'm telling the truth. People want to hear the truth. They don't want it to be clouded in different statements. So at the end of the day, we're going to talk the truth, and I've done that to the last campaign, and we'll continue to do it now. And I'm calling David Cicilline and holding him accountable for what he's done to the city of Providence.
That is Anthony Gemma, who lost in the primary last time running against David Cicilline and David Siegel. He said there, "I took a softer approach." And that is now how the political landscape works. How ugly a primary race could we see here? If he thought his last approach last time was soft, what is this one going to look like?
This one could get very ugly. I mean, if he decides to go and really do a strong campaign talking about David Cicilline lying to the voters of the 1st Congressional District, this could get ugly. And the thing is, even if Cicilline wins the Democratic primary, he could be very damaged as a result of Anthony Gemma's attacks on him.
Yeah.
Because I think a Democratic primary makeup sort of favors David Cicilline over Anthony Gemma.
And the more that race heats up, the less Brendan Doherty has to debate David Cicilline, so he wants to send him a fruit basket.
Money. David will have to spend a lot of money in the primary and have a lot less money to go after.
But too, the pause we all had there as we started to think, what do we say about Gemma, is very telling. He's still an enigma in some ways. Yes, he ran last time, but this funky way that he's rolling out his likely campaign, his sort of the way he talks about the issues, he's not really going to be working on congressional issues if he runs. He's going to bring the state's leadership together, almost sounding more like a governor or an EDC chairman. It's very different from what we usually see there, which raises a lot of questions about what would happen.
Well, let's bring up the poll number that we pitted Doherty versus Anthony Gemma here, and as you can see, Brendan Doherty still would win that, but the gap is smaller than when we had him up against David Cicilline. So, Joe, can you extract how Gemma would do against Cicilline in a primary here?
Well, the big thing is looking at David Cicilline's job performance. Only 25% of the Democrats gave him a favorable job rating. So that's going to help Anthony Gemma because Democrats don't necessarily like David Cicilline at this point. However, that was not a primary voter profile. Democratic primary voters tend to be more moderate to liberal voters. Good example was Meredith York and Sheldon Whitehouse in the governor's primary. Meredith York, being the more liberal, was able to win that primary. Primary voters in the 1st District are fairly liberal. That's going to help David Cicilline, who's the liberal in this race. If he can mobilize those people, plus he's going to have the established Democrats. Last time he had a 4-way race. David Siegel took liberal votes away from David Cicilline. Bill Lynch took Democratic establishment votes away from David Cicilline. Those aren't votes that are necessarily going to go to Anthony Gemma, unless they really dislike David Cicilline at this point for what has happened.
Just quickly, with Cicilline too, what we're not talking about is his record on the issues in the House, which is he is a down-the-line, loyal Democrat, and the CD1 usually likes that kind of person. So if it wasn't for Providence, there's no reason he would have these problems. But that's no question. Such a massive issue.
Gemma is having trouble gaining traction with his own party here. Are the Democrats going to fall in line if he were to win the primary?
I think definitely yes, because they do not want control of the Republicans. That's the great Satan.
What's their problem with him then? Would you say? Any thoughts?
When we were talking off air, I think you gentlemen were correct. He looks like a Johnny-come-lately. Where did he emerge from? It's not like he's an absolute stalwart as a Democrat that we've heard about for many years. I think you said, Ted, that he has a very short shelf life as being perceived as a Democrat, and I think that does hurt you.
We've seen this before in Rhode Island. We've seen businessmen come up and run for office. Example, in the Democratic primary, Richard Lorber against Phil Noel. Beat him for the U.S. Senate by 100 votes. The Democrats fell in line behind Lorber, but he got defeated by John Chafee convincingly in the general election. So they may fall behind Gemma, but Doherty may have a lot of momentum by the fall.
And Gemma hasn't always shown he was great in a debate situation either, which could equalize things with Brendan Doherty. Then we saw that. Remember, he said millions in taxes and things like that.
But Gemma now has experience in debates. Doherty has zero experience.
Again, he has to run a totally different type of campaign. He can't do, like you said, Ted, talk about EDC. He has to talk about congressional issues. He has to talk about Washington, not the state of Rhode Island.
Who has to talk about Washington?
Gemma.
No, don't you think he has to talk about Providence?
Well,
up, down, and
but
sideways?
also, he's talking about positive issues. He can't be talking about state issues more. He has to talk about national issues. But obviously, his main focus will be on David Cicilline. He'll talk about trust, as will Brendan Doherty. You can trust what I say. Can you trust what David Cicilline says?
All right, we're going to take a break here on the program. I'm with Joe Fleming, Ed Fitzpatrick, Arlene Violet, Ted Nesi. This is a political roundtable. We're going to be talking Lincoln Chafee and the financial problems facing so many cities and towns in this state. You're watching Newsmakers. Stay with us. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Special treat for you, a political roundtable this week, and joining me, and I thank them very much, we have WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi, Arlene Violet, Ed Fitzpatrick from the Providence Journal, and pollster and Eyewitness News political analyst Joe Fleming. Let's talk about Lincoln Chafee. Ted, this week he unveiled his legislative package to deal with financially crumbling cities and towns. Give us some highlights.
Well, it's the wish list of the mayors, you could almost say.
Right.
I mean, it's what struck me. I counted at least 17 different planks that are within this set of bills, and it's some of the most cherished parts of the way the law is structured for organized labor. I mean, it would change binding arbitration for police and fires. It would remove the mandate for school bus monitors. It would limit pension benefits. It would change how collective bargaining works. I mean, all these different things, Chafee says, would be tools given to the mayors only in the most highly distressed communities, but you're talking about almost every one of these would be a fight in and of themselves. 17 of them together is it's hard to imagine what's going to happen at the Assembly.
Is this his Waterloo, Lincoln Chafee's?
Well, you know, I think he's in danger of going 0 for 2, 0 for 3. Like, he pushed for the sales tax expansion, he didn't get that. He pushed for the municipal pension reform, he didn't get that. And I think it's going to be very hard to accomplish, to get all of this package passed. Very hard.
Yeah, but even if some of it got passed, wouldn't it be a victory for Lincoln Chafee? And I guess it does beg the question, what are the chances of this bill on Smith Hill? Isn't this more palatable than the one that Governor Kachiri had? Because it's a bill that wouldn't be a blanket application to all cities and towns, but to distressed cities and towns. Does that make it an easier pill to swallow?
It could. I mean, Chafee's pitch lately to the unions has been, look what happened in Central Falls to your brothers and sisters in the unions there. 55% cut in pension benefits, complete restructuring of their contracts.
Yeah.
And I'm only applying to this to the cities that are considering Chapter 9. And so you would still maybe have a better bet sitting down with these different rules in those places and dealing with it. I'm not trying to change what Westerly does. I'm not trying to change what South Kingstown does. I'm sure that's the pitch he'll also be making to Don Ruggiero in the Senate. But at the same time, I mean, you open the door to some of these things, and organized labor has fought hard for them. It's going to be very hard to convince them.
There's no question they see it as an attack on collective bargaining. And Joe, unions, this is Lincoln Chafee's ground game. This is what helped him get elected as governor.
The unions were the main group that got him elected governor.
Yeah.
He won in a very close race. And he has done everything to alienate the unions in the last year and a half. He said he would support binding arbitration, went against it. The unions felt, well, with Lincoln Chafee as governor, pension reform, if it's made, it'll be more moderate and we can work with him. Well, they went to extreme pension reform. And he signed a law giving strong pension reform, yet he got no credit for it.
Well, the die is cast, though, isn't it? I mean, Lincoln Chafee has put this plan out there. His fate is now in his hands.
No
he
question.
just can't throw it out and then walk away from it and become, mealy-mouthed about it. He's got to really run with it now. He's got to get all the good government groups to back it up. And if he's successful, he's going to change his constituency, which is going to be the property tax owners, which then gives him new life, potentially, to run another day.
He might change it. However, Gina had like 8 months to go out there and really educate people, talk to all different groups. We're in the middle of March now. The General Assembly wants to be out by the first week in June this year. So he's down to 6 or 8 weeks to really make this happen.
So he'll say, just pass it.
But if he does that, he's going to be in trouble. He has to get people to support this, community groups to go out and support it. If he doesn't do that, it's going to just die.
He's right. It's a crisis, and we all see what's happening to the cities. It definitely needs to be addressed, but can he deliver?
The other side of it, though, is we're talking a lot about the unions, and I can imagine a property taxpayer at home saying, "Who cares about the unions? My car tax bill soared this year. My property tax bill is up. My mayor's talking about filing for bankruptcy. How can the Assembly not be considering drastic emergency measures?"
It's true. And I think they will do something. They may not do all 17. They may do 2 or 3 of them. But they will probably do something. The other problem Chafee has is simply, he has no support in the General Assembly. There's no group he can say, this is my party.
But is that true? I think if you were to take a poll, he did horribly in our poll, favorability. But if you were to poll the General Assembly, just speaking to legislators, he would actually do fairly well.
They like Lincoln Chafee. There's no question. They feel they can talk to Lincoln Chafee. They feel they can work with Lincoln Chafee. They feel they can compromise with Lincoln Chafee. However, he can't just say, I'm supporting this, so I got 35 votes automatically because these people are supporting me. He has to negotiate every little thing.
I think the crucial person here, in a lot of ways, will be Senate President Paiva-Weed. I think her and her leadership team. I think how they come down on this, how the laborers union feels about a lot of this. I think if this can if a lot of this can pass the Senate, Speaker Fox will push it through the House. He's close to Mayor Taveras, and he's shown he has very strong control in that chamber.
You know, Arlene, you said made this a big moment for Lincoln Chafee. This bill is huge.
Yes.
But we're two years out from his next election. Do you think there's a path for him to turn it around?
It is a path, because I agree not all 17 planks, as it were, is going to get passed.
Right.
Some of it will, and then he has time to build on that and create himself as the mayor's governor, which is what his moniker has been up to this point. And then I've been protecting the property tax owners. I hated doing this. I'm a strong believer, but it's better than nothing, because 55% of your pensions would be cut potentially, like Central Falls. He can turn this around. So from a campaign perspective, he's got 2 years. But I agree with you. He's got a very short window now to get several of them passed.
He has to be the front person on this, not the mayors.
Right.
The mayors get out there and start becoming the front people for this bill. Chafee will be pushed back again and get no credit for it.
And get the credit for it. Yeah.
Right.
But if he's the front person, and you're talking about he has no support anywhere, why would he help the bill if he's the leader of it?
I think politically something interesting to watch for actually is how the mayors work this. You know, forgetting Chafee's political fortunes for a second, in terms of getting it passed, the mayors usually have much stronger approval ratings than the assembly.
Right.
The mayors have a closer relationship with their people. If the mayors will call out their local reps and senators and say, sorry that I'm raising your property taxes 5% this year, but I told the assembly what I needed and they didn't feel like doing it. They're organized labor
They've been
supporters.
saying that for years.
That happened last time with the car tax. The people blamed the General Assembly and not the mayors. The mayors did a very good job of educating the public that we're giving you this car tax, but it's not our fault. The General Assembly gave it to you.
And the Assembly will be up for a re-election later this year, and while they might not like passing this, they might also not like to have the mayors.
And all the car tax bills have come in now. And
the consequences aren't there. I mean, the consequences are the teetering for municipalities. I mean, the fact of the matter is, unlike car tax, it doesn't have the dire circumstances that will inure if they don't do something to help out these cities.
Two of your General Assembly leaders are from Providence. Speaker Fox and Majority Leader Ruggiero are both from Providence over in the Senate.
Yeah.
I mean, so they're going to want to make sure Providence is taken care of. Even though Dominic's a labor person, he knows he has to take care of his city of Providence.
You know, with the cities and towns, is there an argument that the cities and towns would be better off with a city manager over a mayor here? When you look at, with the exception of East Providence, all the cities and towns that are having problems have mayors at the helm. And you know what? You got to make promises to get elected into that position. So would Central Falls be better off, and I'll direct it to you, Ted, with a city manager over a mayor?
You know, we have to, there's a balance there, right? You want to protect democracy. You know, it's a basic fundamental thing in America, and we've seen in Central Falls the concerns when you have no one you can go to who is actually speaks for the people.
That's what a city council's for.
On the other hand, we have a systemic management problem in government in Rhode Island. And when I say management, I just mean, are the books matching up? Look at what happened in Woonsocket. The school department, they were running, a high-placed state official noted to me, they were running a surplus deficit in payroll. How do you not notice that when it's being sent out every 2 weeks?
Right.
You know, I mean, these are not, that was not the recession might have caused the lack of revenue, but the recession did not cause them to be unable to balance their books.
But manage Central Falls, live in Barrington.
Yeah, well, that's what people are doing.
Yeah. That's true.
The school committees, though, are a major issue. Warren, finding out that they have all these deficits, and then the town finds out, oh, we got downgraded by Moody's. There's a systemic problem. He's 100% correct, and I don't think it's the form of government. I think it's the history of ho-hum that occurs in these municipalities.
My guess is, knowing voters in Rhode Island, if you put it on the ballot in the city of town, they'll vote to keep the mayor.
I agree.
I agree with you.
Ed, another bill or bills pending up at Smith Hill have a lot to do with transparency, and much to my delight, you often write about the problems in our Public Records Act. There's, as I said, some bills up there, but this stuff usually dies. You know, it's not the stuff that gets members of the General Assembly reelected. It's just not sexy enough.
Right?
We're
trying to bring sexy back.
We're trying to bring sexy back to public records, and man, are you the guy to do it.
Especially on St. Patrick's Week.
Right.
St. Fitzpatrick.
What needs to happen for this stuff?
Well, I think that there is a good chance we could get some legislation passed this year. It's long overdue, you know, that access to Public Records Act has not been updated in about a decade, and it's a very weak law. It's, as you say, it's like a menu to say no.
Right.
And, you know, I think the main thing that needs to happen is they need to flip the presumption from secrecy to openness.
Right.
And if they can manage that, I think it'll be a success. Representative Marcello has an excellent proposal. And I'm encouraged to see that the Attorney General, Peter Kilmartin, has also come forward with a bill. And if the leaders can take the best aspects of both of those bills and pass something this year, I think it'll be a great accomplishment.
And Kilmartin has some juice up on Smith Hill, so you would think that maybe this might be the year to have some change.
And the General Assembly has been
30
doing
seconds.
things you would not expect, such as Arlene was surprised, pension reform. No one ever thought they would do that. So open meetings, I think, would have a chance this year.
And John Marin at Common Cause has made the point many times. Rhode Island, for all its flaws, is not always a laggard on this stuff. We have some strong rules on campaign finance and other things. So as much as we know the reputation here, it doesn't have to be that way, and it's not always that way. So there is room for hope.
Arlene Violet, Ted Nesi, Ed Fitzpatrick from the Journal, Joe Fleming, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Great roundtable. I really appreciate it. It's a big year for politics, and the place to go is WPRI.com. You get exclusive poll results, and the man that Politico said is the man, Ted Nesi. Nesi's Notes, WPRI.com. I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.